to the Second Win podcast. I am your host, Kerry Graves, K Square, KG, or just Kerry. So I left off with an introduction episode into season two. And during that introductory episode, I mentioned that I would take a brief look back at season one. And I'm going to do that with some of the titles, maybe a few brief words about each of the episodes. And then we're going to discuss how you go about finding a mental health therapist and some of the expectations, not only for the therapist, but for you as well. Sometimes people get it twisted a little bit and need hand holding, but I'm here to tell you that it's all about accountability for you, the client or the patient. But I digress. And let me give you a little bit of information about season one and just kind of what that looked like. I started off with an episode that um, quite a few people talked to me about, and that was, or the title was, Douchebags in Sports and Sports Culture. That one really hit home for me in the sense of I've coached for quite a long time. I've coached high school basketball, high school football, played football. Um, but the things and the people that I've seen in sports do some of the things that they've done, some of these coaches are freaking douchebags. And it's all about them. I did this. I do that. I've heard this recently. We've put in so much work. Mm, you haven't really. The player has put in a ton of work. And this is about them, not about you. And I wrap that around the mental health aspect and the child abuse and neglect aspect because there is one. And we, your normal, everyday, average person, may not see that with some of the coaches that we want and pick for our kids because we want the best for little Timmy or Miss Amanda. We're willing to overlook things that should never go unnoticed. I think I mentioned in the opening, episode one, I said CPLA. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a true douchebag in sports. But it goes beyond that. It has implications for mental health, implications for child abuse and neglect, physical abuse, emotional abuse. So when we're looking at something, sports, don't take your eyes off of the purpose, who's teaching, not coaching, who's teaching your kids, and how they handle themselves, how they treat your kids. So that was one of my first episodes in season one, and um, at this point, one of my favorites. So I'm gonna go down the list here. I've talked about racism and mental health and absent fathers, and the two are not synonymous. Typically, or from time to time, I'll talk about a couple of topics in one show. Racism and mental health is a big thing, whether you want to believe it or not. And I touched on some of the things that I've seen for the better part of at least 15 years in the mental health field. But I also touched on absent fathers and why that is so heartbreaking, but B, something that I don't know if we're doing as much as we could for it. One of my other episodes, What Are We Doing to Our Children, was the title. I mentioned in episode one a statistic about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. 64% of US adults say that they've experienced more than one ACE. What are we doing to our children? Exposing them to things they should not be exposed to for a variety of reasons. Child development, brain development, variety of different reasons. Other podcasts, Who's My Mama, was a social services case, and Protecting the Ponzi Scheme King out of Lexington, North Carolina, from when I was a thriving protection specialist, personal protection specialist. And this gentleman operated one of the largest Ponzi schemes in the world at that point, called Zeekler, Zeekler. Research that. I protected this gentleman, even when the SEC, the Secret Service, the feds all came knocking on his door because there were some unhappy people that thought he stole money from them. I'm not saying they're right, I'm not saying they're wrong, but do your research and then you tell me. Another podcast, DSS is in trouble. They're always in freaking trouble. That is going to take up a whole show soon, and you don't want to miss that one. The world of private investigations and social services. So I've been a private investigator for 21 years now. And that world is something of its own. And earlier I mentioned racism and mental health, private investigations. And I'm only talking about the state of North Carolina at this point, but I know investigators in other states. At one point in North Carolina in 2012, 2014, I don't remember the year specifically, even though I have it somewhere. There were 1,500 licensed private investigators and or sprinkled in security companies. There were less, less than 20 minorities who were private investigators and or that operated, not worked for, operated security companies. And people might want to say, well, minorities just didn't apply for licenses. I'm going to stop you right there. Untrue. But that might be something I can get into later. I've also talked about accountability in sports. And on the flip side, the B side of that was an introduction into child welfare, which I'm going to do again from A to Z, the rooter to the tutor. I'm telling it all about DSS and child welfare and how it works, who's employed there, and then we'll get into some systemic issues. I've talked about culture and competition and how it relates to child welfare and mental health. So, a variety of topics. And, I've been asked, well, why did the podcast stop? Because I was getting some good information. Well, one of the reasons is life is busy. And now I've found more time, but most importantly, more of a desire to put out certain messages due to our day to day functionality. I'll leave it at that. What gets us motivated as people or not? What causes us to feel anger, irritability, depression, sadness, anxiety? All of those things factor into how people deal with each other day to day and how people deal with themselves sometimes. So, variety of topics going to be coming at you once or twice a week. At the moment, no guest speakers, but I've got some lined up. Going to have some pretty healthy conversations. And as I mentioned in episode 1, this is about putting information out into the atmosphere that people may or may not know. Or maybe somebody needs a pick me up or wants to know how to deal with certain situations. And it's coming from a black male perspective. But again, I'm going to tell it like it is, just like I do when I meet with clients or patients in a non judgmental stance. And I'm not going to interject my thoughts about my life and how I would handle situations on someone else whose shit is entirely different than mine. To me, that would be malpractice to tell someone, you need to do this. Oh my God, why did you don't do that? It's not your life, it's theirs. Lead people in a direction where they can make informed decisions and grow as people and be accountable. So, enough of that. Let's talk about people needing therapy. Episode one, I believe everyone should get some kind of therapy. And before you make the jump, you have to understand the purpose of therapy. The purpose of therapy, theoretically, is to help improve somebody's quality of life on a day to day basis. And that can be done through a variety of methods. It takes a lot for someone to admit that they need to talk to someone because they may think, oh, it makes me weak. It doesn't make you weak. It takes courage to ask someone for help. So, taking that step, you've got to find the right fit for you. What kind of therapist do you want? Now, there are a variety of different therapists who do different things, who specialize in different things. But what is right for you? Is it that they can meet in the afternoons or in the mornings? Is it because of the way they look? Is it because of religious or other affiliations? Is it because of what types of therapy they provide? Or is it you want somebody that's going to keep it real? Or you want somebody that's been through potentially some of the same things you may be seeking help with? Either way, you should not take that process lightly. Do your research, do your homework, and figure out what's best for you. Whether you want in person, whether you want virtual, whether you'll try and see which one works for you and then make a decision. You have to be comfortable wherever you're at and whoever you choose to be your therapist. Now, coming from the therapist perspective, let's say you've chosen a therapist and you're meeting for the first time, you can expect an intake, quite a few questions about history, family history, medications, if any, medical conditions, children, employment, and what brings you to therapy at that point in time. But you can also expect to talk about or listen to a therapist discuss insurance versus sliding scale, out of pocket, policies as far as communication, how appointments will run, how long will appointments be, what modality might be used, treatment plan. So there will be a lot of moving parts. And lest I not forget, HIPAA, confidentiality is obviously huge. One of the most important things that I try to tell individuals and or families is you are the driver of the bus. It's up to you if you want to come to therapy. It's not up to me. Would I love to help you? Of course. But if you want to be in therapy, you have to be there. If you want to be in therapy, you have to communicate. Hey, just checking in to make sure my next appointment is X date. Hey, can you make sure you send the link this afternoon for tonight's appointment? Hey, can I go ahead and schedule the next appointment? One of the things that happens is clients or patients will disappear. And a therapist might not respond because this is your treatment. Now, a good therapist will check in. For example, if a client has missed an appointment 1 week, but then they don't follow back up for their next appointment. So now we're looking at 2 weeks. A therapist might send an email the third week. Hey, checking in, want to make sure everything is okay. Haven't heard from you. It's up to you to ensure that you scheduled those appointments. You receive the information you need to be in an appointment or on an appointment. Some might say, well, man, that's shouldn't the therapist have some? Yeah, which is why there's that check in. Hey, are you okay? Just want to check on you. But we have to be responsible for our own treatment. Sometimes people just don't want to be there and they're made to be there. They're made to go to therapy. Maybe it's a husband and a wife, and one or the other demands that they go to a therapist, but maybe they really don't want to be there and they don't show up. That means that they might not be ready for therapy. And that goes for individuals who fall off the face of the earth from time to time. They might not be ready to talk about issues or work through something. Or maybe life happens. So, with that, there are going to be expectations that are set by the client or the patient as well as the therapist. We're going to talk about your goals. So, come prepared. What do you want to accomplish? what to expect from the first session. And in my first session, we're going to build rapport. We're going to talk to each other. I'm going to ask you questions about life in general. Who are you as a person? Because trust has to be built in order for someone to share their innermost secrets, sometimes desires. So we want to build rapport the first couple of sessions. And we want to get to know each other. One of the most important things in a therapeutic relationship is the therapeutic alliance between client and therapist. Without that alliance, it's going to be hard most of the time to connect. I ask a lot of questions. Sometimes people ask a lot of questions, which is wonderful. But again, there has to be a level of comfortability between that therapist and the client. And then, of course, we will set up, you will set up days and times to meet weekly, bi weekly, monthly, time of day, and we're off and running. But on the front end, one of the most important things to do is do your homework and your research. As a therapist, I see victims of trauma, childhood trauma, adolescents, teens, from about 13, 14 on up to about the mid 30s, unless there is some childhood trauma that needs to be worked on, then I'll see clients and our patients accordingly. But I also see veterans, military veterans. I was in the military for 10 years and understand some of the traumatic experiences that one might face in the military. So everyone is going to have their own niche. I conduct DBT therapy, EMDR, fairly soon, ketamine assisted psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, a little play therapy, trauma focused therapy. But you, as the client or patient, have to be comfortable and understand, well, I like that therapist, but they don't utilize what I'm looking for. And that's okay. Have a list of three or four therapists, someone that does what you want them to do therapeutically. So, that being said, that is my brief guide on how to find a therapist, what to look for, the accountability in finding a therapist and being in therapy, at least on or from my perspective, as well as a recap of some of the podcasts I've previously put out in season one. The next podcast, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you, get your popcorn ready. I'm coming out no bullshit. And I'm coming out ready to discuss some issues. All right. Thank you. And until the next time, this is the Second Wind Podcast. And we'll see you next time.